Hello everybody. This is quite an ambitious thing to try and get into a 15-minute slot, but I'm going to give it a go because I just did one of these and it was 21 minutes. So I'm going to see if I can get it into a 15-minute slot, which is the allocated slot that I can get it into. So this blog is another MBTI blog to do with how an ENFJ works. I don't think many people understand exactly how an ENFJ works, and I don't think that this video will fully explain it, but at least I can come at least 1% into understanding it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain it in a few different parts. So I'll explain the functions that we use, the first four. Then I'll explain what you see, usually from the outside of an ENFJ. I'll explain what's on the inside of an ENFJ. What more mature ones are more likely to, how more mature ones are likely to behave, and what's difficult for all ENFJs to have to deal with. I've had to cut this slightly shorter as well. So anyway, so I'll explain the functions first. So extroverted feeling is all to do with our dominant function. It's all to do with how other people feel. So what extroverted feeling is there to do is understand how other people feel rather than yourself, and then help other people feel better. So it understands how people feel, and then when it links with our introverted intuition, which is our secondary function, it helps us to explain using our communication skills. So what happens with our introverted intuition is that it extracts information from between the lines, and it looks at patterns, and it quietly and subconsciously, because I don't think that many ENFJs are completely conscious of how their introverted intuition works, it subconsciously gathers this information, and then it figures out how to communicate, feeling information so that other people can feel even better than they are at the moment. So it then raises the whole level of everybody's feelings up. That's the idea of it. Our third function our tertiary function is extroverted sensing, and it basically helps ENFJs to have a great kind of outer look, because what ENFJs are dealing with are, on our extroverted side, all of our things that we display to the world are the way that the senses of the world right now. So we're in the moment with our extroversion, and we're feeling the moment, which is what our extroverted feeling does. I mean, if you look at an ESFJ, who's a very close cousin to an ENFJ, they have SI instead of SE, and they have introverted sensing second. So what they'll do is they'll be looking at the past in a more traditional way and using their experience to fix things now. But we don't have that. We have extroverted sensing at a much higher level. So basically it generates this kind of outer false veneer of understanding feelings now and understanding senses right now. So we're very much in the moment when we're only using when we're kind of in our extroverted appearance. Our final function, our introverted thinking, is basically what usually it does is it informs the rest of the ENFJ exactly what they've already got wrong. So introverted thinking provides a huge amount of information. It tries to look at all aspects of things, and it feeds introverted intuition so that the introverted intuition can observe patterns, and so it gathers all the information it can. Introverted thinking gathers all the information that it can, feeds into the introverted intuition, and it gets answers. That's what it's looking for. So those are the functions that we use. So what you see on the outside of an ENFJ. So interestingly, on the outside of an ENFJ, we appear very bouncy and very happy. And when you ask a bunch of ENFJs what best describes them as people, they usually always come out with words like exciting and awesome and cool and whatever, right? But this is an exact and direct reflection of everything which makes them extroverted. These are all of the extroverted things. You know, it's the I am feeling the moment and I am sensing the moment thing again. So they're extroverted feeling, they're extroverted sensing. This is the one word which describes them best, and it makes other people feel happier. They think, well, if I meet an ENFJ, I will be excited, I will feel awesome, and I will feel cool when I'm with the ENFJ. These things that they say as single words to describe themselves. So they're really good at keeping up this exciting exterior veneer, which is very accommodating and warm, because most of it is extroverted feeling, of course. And they're very much go with the flow people, and because they have extroverted sensing, they can go with the flow and enjoy sensational things. They can enjoy extroverted sensing stuff in a row sometimes. You know, it's like extroverted sense after extroverted sense. They can just deal with that. So they listen to their group, and they generally try to agree with what's happening, because we're very agreeable people. However, the interesting thing about the ENFJ, even on the outside, is that if you approach an ENFJ and you begin to talk about much deeper things, and someone hijacks the conversation into this deeper level, they'll really love it, because their introverted intuition lives in the future, and it lives with abstract patterns and concepts. So it really values, if someone suddenly says something really deep, they're just like, right, great, I can talk about something really interesting now. And I think, I mean, that's certainly something that I search for, and I think that probably a lot of other ENFJs search for as well. And I'll talk about that in relation to how we start to feel lonely in a group later. So when we're nervous or overexcited, ENFJs can get stuck in an FE-SE loop, where they're just using their extroverted functions to communicate or to be. And I've previously mentioned that in other videos and things like that. And that ends up with them actually hijacking some situations where there's so much in the moment they forget to include other people. You know, it's like extroverted feeling, extroverted sensing. Let's just make people feel good and make people sense. And it kind of forgets actually to read between the lines. Maybe the things that they're doing aren't making everybody feel good, which is something that ENFJs have to watch out for. So what's on the inside of an ENFJ? Okay, so on the inside of an ENFJ are things which are deeply logical. Okay, with a view, we basically have confusion. We have conclusions, not confusions. We have conclusions based on our strong introverted intuition, and we inform that with our introverted thinking. Then we compare it with how we feel, of course, but only when we're on our own are we able to figure out exactly how we feel about certain things, because usually our feeling is always extroverted, so we're communicating with our feelings, and people talk about their feelings. So we hope that we can see all of the angles possible using our TI, but we can't, not usually, because it's our last function, so it's just not as strong as our other ones. And so we observe patterns, and we place ideas into categories of correct and incorrect using our J, and then we compare it with how we feel, and we decide whether or not we want to feel a certain way about something, and then we act on it like that. And we place all these things into a jigsaw-like pattern, and we understand the world in that way. Interestingly, in order to change these conclusions, we have to use our extroverted function, our FE. We have to use our extroverted feeling, because if we don't communicate with other people, we have no extra outer information to provide to our introverted functions. So we're reliant on our extroverted feeling, just as we're reliant on everything that we have, but we're reliant on our extroverted feeling to change the views, because our views can then come up against somebody who has a convincing argument against our conclusion, which is in our interior, which, you know, our introverted intuition and our introverted thinking, and we're able to change our views by using our extroverted function. Of course, ENFJs who are caught on their own all the time and unable to do any extroversion can be caught in a very unhealthy internal struggle, which is an NITI loop. Basically, they'll become much more jaded and pessimistic, which is against their normal nature. And that happens because being unable to actually extrovert makes the ENFJ feel alone, and they don't have new information for their internal stuff. So they're reliant, everybody's reliant on their extroverted function to compare what they have inside of them with the outside world. And that certainly happens with ENFJs. Now, what happens with more mature ENFJs is that they're much more able to handle not having to be pleasant to everybody. Okay, that's what we really want to do. Extroverted feeling is all about trying to please everybody, and it's just not possible. Okay, it's not possible to please everybody all the time. And it's also possible to disagree and still be nice about it. And it seems to be a prerequisite of ENFJs to be nice to people about things. And we also become aware that we don't have to apologise for everything that we think. And this is specifically linked with our introverted thinking. We have introverted thinking, which is our most embarrassing function and our most private thing. We're not proud of how we think, so we hide these thoughts underneath a veneer of extroverted feeling. It's easier when we express a thought. It's easy for us to say, "Oh, we've expressed this thought, but we're embarrassed about that thought, so we better hide it again and go straight back to extroverted feeling instead of standing up for it." And ironically, of course, these are the things our FE is our ideology based on our introverted intuition and our introverted thinking. We wouldn't be idealists if we didn't have all of us as we are. It's very difficult because we ought to really stand up for what we believe, but that's very hard when other people believe differently and we're trying to accommodate them. So it's this conflict between accommodating other people's views and kind of trying to meet them in the middle, and deciding that actually sometimes it's just not worth doing it. And this leads me on to actually what's hard for ENFJs. So, and that is like what happens when you meet a group of people that don't actually agree with you. So basically, being an extrovert means that we have to use other people to energize. Okay, that's actually really hard. It's much harder than you think it is. Being an extrovert means that we prefer to be around people. So if we're not around people, we find it harder to get our energy back. Which sounds kind of weird, I know, to introverts. And introverts often talk about how difficult it is for them to deal with social situations when it's hard for us to deal with being alone. And then we're faced with this difficult dichotomy as ENFJs of having people that don't understand us, groups of people that don't understand us, and really we ought to in general try to keep away from that kind of group. We're better off on our own and getting in touch with our introverted intuition and our introverted thinking than kind of meeting with a group of people that don't really get us. I mean, it's fine to do it, obviously. Quite a lot of the time you want to be able to understand other people's worldviews and stuff like that, but it's very difficult when you're in this group of people they don't understand, and all that happens is that you're meeting them. There's no meeting in the middle. That you will meet them on their grounds because they won't give in. So you have to meet them, and then you end up not being yourself anyway. And then this also causes a thing where you're unable to share. So you end up with this stagnant kind of introverted intuition and introverted thinking loop inside, where you won't share anything with these people really, because you might be in a group but there's no point in sharing that stuff because they won't get it. So, and also another thing that's really difficult for ENFJs is not being able to share their dominant extroverted feeling. If we're not allowed to express how we feel about people, it's really difficult because it blocks our first function. So it stops. We're not even allowed to love somebody else. Our feeling thing blocked is incredibly hard to deal with. We also struggle with patterns, our own patterns being doubted, and this is our introverted intuition, where the patterns that we observe are doubted. So, and then when patterns change, because we're used to a pattern with our introverted intuition, and then we have our judging to figure out that pattern is in place. Then when that pattern breaks, we end up having to figure out, and we think that it's something wrong, automatically think that something's wrong because of our feelings. So we struggle to change that pattern and readjust to it. That's really difficult because we're kind of used to judging about the world and knowing where we are. And then now another thing that's difficult is confusion. I'm going to have to try and make this quick. Another thing that's difficult is confusion. If other people are confused about things, then it confuses you because you understand how they're feeling, but if they don't understand how they're feeling, then it confuses you because that's how you deal with the world. I think that's all I can do for this right now. I had another thing on miscommunication, but I'm going to stop here because otherwise it's going to go too long. Bye!